marijuana would not automatically become legal. Rather, states would have the right to decide whether or not they want to legalize the drug without fear of federal impediment. In effect, states would inherit the power to regulate marijuana in the same way state and local laws now govern the sale of alcohol and tobacco. Also, last month, the Justin Trudeau-led Canadian government pledged to fully legalize the cultivation, sale, and recreational use of cannabis. Its implications already sending ripples across the world. Indeed, once the cannabis industry fully develops, there exists a clear opportunity for trade in cannabis, given Jamaica's strong brand and long-standing trade partnership with Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, these actions herald the change in old perceptions about cannabis as a dangerous drug. More and more, governments across the world are seeing the commercial value of cannabis. The responsible development of the cannabis industry here in Jamaica is, therefore, all the more important. With this in mind, the Cannabis Licensing Authority, whose chair Dr. Andre Gordon will speak later this morning, has deliberately remained sequestered as they deliberate with key stakeholders on the tenets of the regulations that will guide the industry. They understand, as I do, the importance of developing a sustainable industry that takes into consideration the best practices in cannabis industry development, while ensuring that it will thrive within the context of the Jamaican socio-economic realities. Ladies and gentlemen, with the world looking on, it is important that Jamaica takes the time to get it right, but not too much time. It's one of the reasons the Cannabis Licensing Authority was established as an early step in the process of developing a sustainable industry and, as stated distinctly in the Act, and I quote, to ensure that international obligations are met, end quote. And how exactly do we, as policymakers in government, intend to ensure that the cannabis industry in Jamaica not only follows best practice, but is developed as a sustainable business opportunity? To my mind, there are 4 hallmarks that we must achieve in order to ensure that the policies that we implement are sustainable and grounded in global best practice. These are a standards-led quality infrastructure, the balance between adopting and adapting of best practices, ensuring optimal economic impact, and last but not least, intellectual property rights protection. Of course, a key component of this will be a strong marketing program to support Jamaica's participation in the industry. While I continue to work with my colleague Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to pave the way for a network of trading relationships, it will be incumbent on entities such as JAMPRO, in partnership with private sector players such as the Jamaica Exporters Association and the Jamaica Manufacturers Association, as well as the Cannabis Industry Associations, the many growers associations springing up around Jamaica, to create the right branding and marketing program to support the expansion of the industry into global markets. Similarly, I expect that the Jamaica Tourist Board will determine how best to position Jamaica to leverage this brand to access new markets and clientele. To this end, there are a few questions that we are answering as we go through the development process. How do we enhance our existing brand association to ensure that it also includes quality and compliance? How will we leverage the Jamaica brand in the development of the cannabis industry relative to our competitors? Where are we currently strong or weak relative to our competitors? How can we reduce our weaknesses while building on our strengths? How will the image of the country affect the image of the Jamaican cannabis and vice versa? Who are our potential customers? What do they want from us? How can we maximize our appeal to them? We still have some work to do, and it is important that we understand that it is not easy to develop and maintain a reputable brand such as the one that I speak of. Because if after developing a quality brand, it suffers through a fall in quality due to the inability to protect ourselves, our industry will rapidly become vulnerable to competition. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an exciting time in government and an exciting time in my ministry. I'm proud to say that as a country, we are on our way to realizing all four of the hallmarks mentioned this morning for the building of a sustainable cannabis industry. The presentations that follow will only serve to reinforce what I have mentioned, but in greater detail. However, what I've spoken about is merely the policy framework for success, just one half of what is needed for the successful establishment of a sustainable best or next practice industry. Perhaps the last important ingredient, which I haven't mentioned in the partnership with you, is the partnership with you, our private sector stakeholders. Because with the framework in place, only the private sector can take that critical step to make the investments necessary to establish a truly sustainable industry that adheres to global best practices and realizes trailblazing success. For our part, however, we are determined to do everything in our power to build a modern, respectable, and legitimate cannabis industry in Jamaica. We will ensure that the new industry is properly managed and that it operates to the highest standards. We will not tolerate any actions that could damage our national brand or bring the growing industry into disrepute. And we will act vigorously to build, protect, and maintain the Jamaican brand name. As a minister with responsibility for industry, and I'd say investment and commerce, it is not very often that we get to be part of the creation of a brand new industry that not just in Jamaica, but globally. As such, it is not lost on me that Jamaica is at the forefront of the emergence of a global industry, and that the watchful eyes of the world are on us. I look forward to your mobilization. I look forward to your mobilization and participation in this exciting new direction, and I offer my personal commitment to supporting the growth of this industry going forward. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'm going to speak to the slides because at the end of the day, I would like these slides to be distributed for critique. As a scientist, we love critique because it does in fact give us a good opportunity to be able to get put in place the kind of rigor that we need in this particular situation. As you can see, now go back to yes. The role and function of the BSJ in the development of a standards-led, market-driven, sustainable cannabis industry. That particular mandate is given to us in policy by the minister who has just given his presentation. And I'd like to place on record the pleasure that I have as a scientist in working with a minister who gives policy framework which are clear and, of course, which are not in the air, so to speak, because what scientists do is try to use science in order to get things done. And so therefore, I'm given this mandate as chairman of the Bureau. This slide is just to give you the legal framework of the Bureau of Standards. And why the minister has in fact given the Bureau this mandate, because it has the legal authority to do just that. It is the focal point for standards and for developing a national quality infrastructure which will, in fact, which is the gateway for export trade. And because this industry is essentially an export trade industry, you have to put it on a footing or on a platform that, in fact, would facilitate this. And these are the legal parameters which support this. Next slide. In this connection, you will see here that there are, the Bureau has membership in 4 critical international standards bodies. I won't go through that. That's just for documentation. Now, the best practice national ganja industry policy mandate, because as you listen to the minister, you will have realized that the minister is not just looking for the development of standards for standards' sake. He's looking for the development of best practice, right, for, as an industry policy, because this best policy is what, in fact, will create the conditions for us to be globally competitive. Now, the mandate, the development of a new sustainable industry, which must be standards-led and market-driven. I've seen a number of persons put in documentation, market-led and standards-driven, and all sorts of permutation and combination. Why this is put there is to give clarity. Because, lower down in the presentation, I'll indicate why we need that. Now, what does this mean? We must enable trade facilitation. We must practice principles of business support and consumer protection in connection with standardization. We must ensure the use of metrology, which is the science of measurement, which comprises legal measurement, that is the accuracy of weighing and measuring devices, industrial measurement, calibration, and quality control, scientific, which has to do with traceability and the development of new measurement methods. And finally, conformity assessment activities such as inspections, audits, product sampling, surveillance, testing, and the certification of products and management systems. So if you see this, that we're developing a new industry which has no precedence, you have to begin, therefore, from first principles, and you have to approach this industry in what we call an iterative way. Those of us who have been involved in what we call new developments, whether in public health or what have you, know that the only way that you're going to be successful is if you do it in a step-by-step way. Every step that you take, what you do is that you evaluate it and you do the analysis. If you can validate that the step, in fact, is in keeping with the conditions, then you move to the next step. And so you will see the step-by-step way that we have been dealing with this particular thing from the Bureau standpoint since we have been given the legal parameters and framework April of this year. The Bureau, the Ministry of Industry and Technology has within it agencies that are vital and necessary to this process. First of all, the only standards organization in the Caribbean which has 4 laboratories: chemistry laboratory, microbiology laboratory, mass laboratory, and of course the packaging and labeling laboratory, is Jamaica. Our mass lab is now a reference lab for the rest of the Caribbean and Latin America if they wish. We are the leading agency after 3.5 years of any standards body in the Caribbean. We say this proudly. Because after 45 years, we can now say that we do not have to go to the United States or Canada or England to validate the competence of any activity in Jamaica in this industry. If it is a HACCP standard or a food safety standard, we are in fact recognized by the FDA as a vital and good partner. And Jamaica now has the quality infrastructure that in fact can enable the building and export of any industry. And that is where we are after 3.5 years of very, very serious work. And I want you to congratulate those workers who are here with us from the Bureau of Standards. Some bright, 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 bright. And so what I'm telling you is that since April of this year, a lot of work has been done, step by step, rigorous work. That's why it is that we. And let me give you an example. We have many labs. I'm being prompted. All right, let's continue. I don't want to get carried away. Now, for the branding, the laboratories that we're going to do for the branding, CariGen, dealing with the genetic typing, which Professor McLaughlin, who is part of the national quality infrastructure, CariTox, looking at the toxicity, our 4 laboratories in the Bureau of Standards, the chemistry laboratory, which will look at all the chemical composition of the plant. And we are now right on track because we now possess all the capabilities. Remember when you asked me, Dr. Gordon, right? That has been corrected. We now can test CBD, THC, or whatever variety. Now, the microbiology. The only microbiology lab, the microbiology lab in government which has global accreditation. That lab will be able to look at what we have here. What are the fungi? What are the viruses? What are the bacteria? Or any one of the other microorganisms. We have that capacity to do that work at global and international accredited standards. So we can test both what is in our local situation and what is in the situation for whomever wishes to invest and bring their seeds. We are able to test that right along the whole value chain from seed to sale. Now, all of that, we also are using iSense from the university. This is the laboratory which deals with, you use nuclear material, and we are going to use that laboratory to do soil tests to determine whether there are heavy metals. And the minister will tell you that we have just set up the International Authority for dealing with radioactive and other materials. It's now chaired by Dr. Conrad Douglas. And that is the oversight of this laboratory. So you know that we are now internationally compliant. They will test for the heavy metals. Then we have GIS, Geographic Information System, and basically it is looking at the geospatial distribution. Say, for example, a ganja farmer is growing his ganja at 1,000 feet. They are able to look at this farm, map out this farm, take all the quantitative data to establish what is known as his intellectual property, to establish his intellectual property rights, his GI, and put all of this quantitative data, referred through JAMPRO, which has been collaborating with us for the past 7 months. Now, that quantitative data does not give you the full true picture. And so, our research graduate students will be going out there to the same farm to deal with what we call qualitative data. They're going to interview people. Who owns the farm? What is the practice? What is the traditional practice? They may have some unique ways in which they practice and grow this particular ganja. We're going to look at the microclimate to determine exactly what is the uniqueness of this microclimate. Out of that, they will begin to get the quantitative, working with the qualitative together to give their IP and their brand. Now, and so this here shows you all the elements of getting that particular thing. Now, we have developed 2 new instruments for doing the qualitative because nobody else has done it in the world. And the qualitative instruments that we use will enable the transition from an illegal to a legal. And we have, next slide. This slide here shows you that methodology which us or graduate students will be using, because we do not want to leave behind any traditional farmer. And what we're saying is that, yes, we give them, even though they may have a year to do 2 crops, we are saying, let us start with giving them as much as 3 years for the transition. We don't know whether 3 years is right, but we're saying it's best to make an error on the side of caution. That is a scientific law in doing iterations. Next slide. Now, the national quality infrastructure for the ganja industry. The Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce has these are all the entities in the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, and why the ministry has to lead this process. Right? Why the ministry has to lead this process. And of course, it has to work with the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, MSTEM, through the Scientific Council, and of course, the Ministry of Finance and Planning, because that is where you're going to have to work together in collaboration so that what taxes you put there does not undermine the capacity of the industry to develop. Because if you look at the US jurisdiction, they put taxes on a whole host of things. Please do not start off by stifling the possibilities of this industry. Let it evolve over time. Next. Now, in conclusion, the ganja industry cannot develop without the collaboration of all parties working together in a harmonious relationship within the framework of the national quality infrastructure informed by the legislative agenda. Each stakeholder is expected to protect his or her rights while at the same time not infringing on the rights of others. When there are competing interests, the best outcome is to strive doggedly for a win-win outcome situation. This type of win-win outcome is a fundamental characteristic of the principle of sustainability of all modern industries. quality standard is the only viable option open to us for achieving the benefits of export trade, global competitiveness, and wealth generation in the long term. The relevance of viability of a regulatory regime rests on the quality of the standards which inform it. Very close collaboration is necessary between and among the elements of the national quality infrastructure if we are to realize a harmonious development of standards and regulation. And finally, the best decision-making process in the modern globalized world is always informed by best evidence, driven by quality data, and quality standards are always derived from best evidence and best practice. Thank you.
All right, so I don't think anyone can doubt the passion, of Professor Davidson as he, seeks to integrate standards into this industry. And as I told you, he would have been happy to stay much longer and elaborate on all those boxes he showed you. But I know that, if you catch him after we finish, he'll be happy to sit down and talk with anyone who wants to go in further detail. Yeah, but I ask you again to applaud Professor Davidson for that very interesting. Okay, now our next speaker is Dr. Andre Gordon, who is the Managing Director of Technological Solutions Limited, TSL, and also Chief Executive Officer of TSL Technical Services Limited. Dr. Gordon has over 29 years of experience in providing solution-oriented technical assistance to various players in the food industry and to small and medium enterprises, private sector and support institutions in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and Canada, also in Western and Southern Africa, the United States, United Kingdom, European Union. So in fact, he is a global player in this area. He used to be Deputy General Manager, Technical Services for Grace Kennedy and Company, and basically he managed all their research and development and quality assurance activities, and eventually he bought out his, that department of Grace to form what is now TSL. So he has done a lot of work in quality, food standards and quality, but he's also very passionate about the small and medium enterprise sector. And, he devotes a lot of his time to developing, small businesses in Jamaica and across the world. He has served in the past as president of the Jamaica Exporters Association. He is very well recognized for his work. He's a recipient of the Canadian Commonwealth Scholarship and several other awards. I note that in 2000, he was recognized by the United States Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department in Jamaica for his leadership of the successful Jamaican effort to regain access for Jamaican acquis. Right. So we do hope that at some time in the future we'll be congratulating him in a similar vein for getting Jamaican cannabis into the United States. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Okay, and he is here in his capacity as head of the recently established Cannabis Licensing Authority, which is going to be the organization at the core of the cannabis industry in Jamaica. And with all of that background, I now ask you to welcome Dr. Andre Gordon, Chairman of the CLA.
What we have been doing at the Cannabis Licensing Authority, and I also want to share with you how we plan to proceed. I thought it important to share with you how the authority is structured. So we have an authority that consists of members from the various stakeholders. So the Ministry of Industry, Investments and Commerce is represented, as is the Ministry of Science, Technology, Energy and Mining, the Attorney General's Chambers, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Health, National Security, Finance and Planning, Agriculture, and fisheries. And then we have representatives from 4 community organizations, which I'll talk about, representatives from academia and the National Council on Drug Abuse. In fact, there are 2 sitting board members from the National Council on Drug Abuse. One represents the Ministry of Health, and the other represents he is the chairperson of the National Council on Drug Abuse. We have 3 established committees: Legal and Regulatory Subcommittee, Communications and Public Education Subcommittee, which is just starting its work and which I chair, and an Enforcement and Security Subcommittee, which is chaired by the retired Major Gregory Webster. By law, by statute, we are required to establish 2 other subcommittees, which is Finance and Procurement and an Audit Subcommittee. So that is how we are set up. Now, how do we operate? The first thing I want to tell you is that we are very mindful of how this opportunity came to arise for Jamaica to establish a world-leading cannabis industry. And so we intend to operate in a completely transparent manner. Let me repeat that. Nothing that we do, that we decide, that is not sensitive at the moment of discussion or decision will be kept away from the stakeholders. All of the information will be made available. We don't expect to give anybody the opportunity to have any doubts about how licenses. The main focus of the CLA is to foster the growth and development and orderly regulation of a legal marijuana or a ganja industry and hemp industry in Jamaica. This will be done in a manner that is consistent with Jamaica's international treaty obligations regarding the use and export of narcotic substances. Nothing that we do will contravene our international obligations. The minister has said it, and we've repeated this multiple times, and we can assure you that that will be the case. Now remember, I told you that the amendment, the DDA Amendment Act, was passed April 1. The end of the first quarter is March 31st. So we will have issued, all things being equal, find the first set of final regulations in less than a year. There is no precedent for that anywhere. Finally, I'd like to thank my colleague director, Diane Shillette Cox, who she has loaned to us to help us with our work from JAMPRO, and the hard-working team at JAMPRO and the Ministry of Industry, Investments and Commerce for facilitating the work that we have done. My colleague directors, Kathy, I can't thank you enough, because up until now you've borne a lot of the brunt of making sure. Be careful about that driver comment, it has some history in Jamaica. Maybe at the front of the bus, let's put it that way, and it's not headed over the cliff. We've worked really hard, and we intend to work with you, the stakeholders, all stakeholders, to create for Jamaica and the world an industry that offers to Jamaica, or visitors that come here, and the rest of the world, the finest that Jamaica has to offer in cannabis, legally available and legally available cannabis products. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we thank Dr. Gordon for assuring us, that our development of our cannabis industry is in good hands, and he has demonstrated that, the CLA is actually doing a lot of work. I know they have not really publicized much of what they have done, because I think they want to put everything together before they really come to the public, but he has assured us today they are hard at work and they are moving quickly. We look forward to first quarter next year when we should have formal regulations for the cannabis industry in Jamaica. I ask you again to applaud Dr. Gordon for that very interesting presentation. Okay, our final speaker before we go into the panel discussion is Diane Edwards, who is president of JAMPRO, a former trade commissioner for JAMPRO in New York, Brussels, and London. Ms. Edwards has a wealth of knowledge and experience in international marketing, export promotion, and business development. Equally adept at investment promotion, she has played a key role in landing the Spanish hotel chains Rio and Iberostar, and was instrumental in the development of Jamaica's garment subcontracting and information and communications technology industries. Before rejoining JAMPRO in 2013, she served as a general manager of J. Ray and Nephew UK, where she led the organization to profitability and successfully grew the company's turnover by 77%. Ms. Edwards holds an MBA from New York Space University, a master's in international relations from the Institut d'études politiques de Paris, or better stick to English, the Paris Institute of Political Studies, and also a BA honors in French, Spanish, and German, so quite international, from the University of the West Indies. As was mentioned, JAMPRO has been assisting the CLA in this development and is playing a role. And just as they promote other Jamaican industries, they do expect to promote the cannabis industry. So I ask you to welcome Ms. Diane Edwards, President of JAMPRO.
Like the Minister, I'm really excited to be here today. And if anyone doubts my commitment to the cannabis product, I will tell you a little anecdote. 20-odd years ago, when I was Trade Commissioner for Jamaica in Brussels, I was based in at the time, there was a Jamaican who was head of the laboratory services at Shearing Plough in Berlin. And at the time, Cannasol was a new product, relatively new. And I took this product to him because I was very excited about the fact that Jamaica could create this product from its own soil and that we could actually have an opportunity on the international market to bring this product to market. He actually took the product, his name was Bob Henry, he actually took the product, he actually got it analyzed by Shearing Plough, and they became really interested in it. What stopped them from going further, they told me, was that at the time, the US market was not ready for this product. The US market was not having it. They were not even looking at the opportunity to use a pharmaceutical product based on cannabis. So I couldn't go further with it. So I got a bit frustrated, but the point is that I saw from then the potential that we are now starting to realize. So this is really a great day and a very exciting time for us. Hence, I share the Minister's enthusiasm and excitement for this product. And this is a Jamaican product that Jamaica can lay claim to, and that's what makes it even more exciting. So we all know what marijuana, what cannabis is. I think what is important about it is the number of chemical compounds and active compounds that give us huge opportunities for a variety of product development, new product development, which goes from the nutritional to the nutraceutical to the medicinal. We tried to find out what does a market look like, because this is a great opportunity we have to actually develop a product for a market that exists. But obviously, being a product, as I call it, in transition, it's very difficult to determine what is the real market for, what is the market value at the moment. But the point is that the market is huge and the market is growing. So where do I see the opportunities for Jamaica? Well, there are definite opportunity, and I'll go into that in a little while. There are estimates of recreational use of marijuana by Americans is that 10% of the population over 12 is estimated to have tried it and to have used it, which gives you a market of between 10 and 40 billion. As you see, I'm trying to get some sense of the market size, which is very challenging. There definitely is an opportunity in research, in pioneering groundbreaking research, and there is a huge opportunity for Jamaica to become that center of excellence that Dr. Gordon talked about, that Dr. McLaughlin talked about, Professor McLaughlin, sorry, talked about yesterday. I think there is an opportunity in export of services, because as we become that center of excellence, globally recognized and accredited, we will be able to attract the best scientific minds to come to Jamaica to develop their R&D and to develop new products. There is definitely an opportunity, as I said, and as Minister said, to develop a full value chain locally where we control the whole chain of the product from the field to the consumer, and that is a huge opportunity. When I was at Ray & Nephew, we used to call it from grass to glass, and that really gave us an opportunity to ensure quality every step of the way, because that quality is what, and authenticity is what the consumer wants today. And the whole ethos of Rastafari is so ingrained and so in sync with what is happening with the green consciousness internationally that it gives us a huge opportunity to develop products that tap into that. Obviously, the regulations are a work in progress, and you've heard a lot about that from Dr. Gordon. So there are still lots of challenges with that. But we think that the point about where we are today is that we can prepare ourselves. We can do all the things, put all the building blocks in place to be ready for the opportunity when everything is in place. And that's a huge advantage. So if we go to the next slide, looking at the growing opportunity, there is an opportunity for both small and large farmers to get involved in growing and to look at different forms of growing and collaborating. One of the things we're not good at in Jamaica is collaborating in groups, in associations, in buying cooperatives, in growing cooperatives in different forms. So the agro-parks, I think, is a way to operate in that manner, to start looking at collective relationships where we can generate and centralize some of the products that we need to centralize so that we can achieve the economies of scale that we can achieve. So if you look at cooperatives, if you look at the whole mother-farm relationship, if you look at how Jamaica Broilers operates with, providing all the inputs to small farmers and small farmers growing out the chicks and selling them back to Jamaica Broilers, that's one way that small farmers and MSMEs can get involved in the business. Greenhousing is going to be an area, obviously, and the whole question of export versus local processing. We have to look at every step of the value chain and where the opportunities lie for us. In terms of the export market for us, import market for other countries, there are a lot of challenges. Canada is probably in the forefront of the countries that allow import, and Canada is probably going to be one of the partners that we will have to work with very closely in the near future before other countries catch up. Canada has regulations already called Marijuana for Medical Purposes regulations, and so I think our Ministry of Foreign Affairs will need to be working very closely with Health Canada to ensure that we are able to get into that import license chain. Israel is hugely advanced but very heavily regulated. They allow limited importation and limit the categories of people that can access the drug. Germany, they have only granted one import license to date, and that is from a Dutch company, so there are very great challenges there. Italy and Spain allow some amount of private use and cultivation for private use. But really, the markets that we're going to have to work on in the short term, as I said, Canada, I think, in the forefront, and we will watch the situation in the US very closely to see how many more states come on board. Okay, next. In terms of R&D, as I said, I think the opportunity here is to develop that global center of excellence where we become the primordial country that is out there in front of R&D and of clinical trials, which are not allowed in many of the other countries yet. We have a real opportunity here with our educational institutions, and I'm very glad to see that Dr. Grizzle is here from UTech, University of Technology, who have a pharmacology program, and we are training people through our institutions to develop new products, and I think this is really going to be critical in moving ahead with this industry. So the question of pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals, that's another big question, because obviously pharmaceuticals is an opportunity, but it's a very long-term opportunity. So I think Brand Jamaica has a great opportunity here. We want to see this industry grow and flourish. We want to see real spin-offs of this, because we could be creating a cannabis cluster. If we don't even think about all the consumables, we could be thinking board games, we could be thinking apparel brands, like Patois Apparel, for instance, is a case in point. We could be thinking wellness centers, we could be thinking proprietary therapies. None of this at the moment is illegal. So why are we not seizing hold of this, branding the things we need to brand, and going out into the international market? What are we waiting for? Thank you.
Okay, and all right, we really thank Ms. Edwards for that very enlightening presentation. She's challenged us, and she's opening up our minds as to what opportunities there are out there, which we can take, and some, as she points out, we can take hold of immediately. We are now going to go in the interactive part, where you will be allowed to ask questions. But I know you have been sitting long, you have been a good audience. I give you just 2 minutes to stand and stretch your legs before we go into the panel discussion, but just 2 minutes. All right, yeah, so we are now ready to proceed. There is a microphone to my right. Okay. All right, let's regroup, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So we ask that we stay quiet and we go into the sessions of question and answer. As I say, there's a microphone to my right, and I think there's a roving microphone somewhere. But right. So if you have a question, you can either go to this microphone or put up your hand. Yes. Oh, you wanted to ask the first question? Okay, go.
Minister of Health, as a way to get your product out. Will that change now with this new regime? Professor Davidson, would that change now with this regime?
I'll wait until you finish. Because it's not as simple as that, actually.
Okay, all right. And the next thing, as you may know, our university is the National University. We train them on the cannabis opportunities. Their license there, we assume, would have covered the fencing. Is that going to be different now? And do we have to license the CAA as well? So just those 2 questions, and thank you for the opportunity.
She has students in not only pharmacy, but also medical technology, etc., etc. And one of my colleagues at the university. The first question that she asked is very important, and I'll try to answer it in this way. First of all, you have different categories of products which will be under the control in terms of the licensing of the Cannabis Licensing Authority. These have to do with traditional substances, edibles, nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals. Each category has a different standard and a different degree of rigor, scientific rigor, necessary for it to qualify in the particular category or subcategory. In the area of edibles, once it is seen as a food, it has to abide by HACCP standards, or else you cannot take it anywhere. To do it in your backyard, in the privacy of it, etc. Now, what do we talk, when we mean HACCP standards, what do we mean? First of all, it has to do with standards that all foods must adhere to if it wishes to be exported. These standards are standards that the United States of America, for example, have established since January, new standards since January of 2012. We had to scramble in the Bureau to catch up with this, and today we have the capacity to do these. All food processing products, all things labeled as food, have to establish the standards, and we can enable you to get to this standard and be certified or to get a particular seal. If anyone wants to do this particular matter, we have the expertise right here who can tell you exactly what that process is. And so, it is not just sufficient to say that you have this particular product. If you look on the shelf of the Scientific Research Council, you'll see the shelves filled with a lot of products. That is why Jamaica is referred to as a sample producer, or a producer of samples. A sample is not necessarily gone through the rigor of standardization. Until you get there, you do not have a product that is globally accredited. And I'm saying, to get you to the HACCP standard. No. Those standards are going to change again. Right now, if you have a factory and you produce a food of whatever kind, you have to go through the food processing process of the HACCP standards. But those particular processes start within the factory. What is going to happen is, as the US begins to increase the rigor of those standards, is that they're moving from the factory into the soil. Because if trace elements are in the soil and it becomes incorporated in the product, it's going to have to be tested. And so the Bureau is moving to develop a very strong organic regime. So if you do products now, and you do it out there in the soil, because as you know, Jamaica has had, in the disposal of garbage, a lot of infiltration through leakage into the underground water supply, some of which is maybe contaminated with arsenic from the batteries and other heavy metals. These will go back into that food cycle. And if it reaches into the ganja plant, or your callaloo, or your vegetables, and you put that as an ingredient to make whatever, and doing the sample with the testing laboratories, you are seen through walking, you will not be able to export it if you don't meet those standards. What's that? Yes. Okay, those preparations, right? I don't have a problem. Okay. But what I'll say is that once you migrate that into an industry, and that which without the necessary testing, and you use it, say, to use that as a raw or a particular whatever, right? And the side effects affect the person's skin, and it causes a particular problem, you're going to find yourself in a problem, especially because you are now in an export trade industry. And so all of those things have to come on with the particular stream. There's nothing that you eat or drink that doesn't have side effects. Some of you can't eat pork, some of you can't eat shrimp, some of you can't eat. I don't eat pasta.
Okay. All right. Okay, we go to the
There's
gentleman.
an aspect of the question.
Oh.
There's an aspect of the question, about the dispensaries and farms. I don't get into a lot of details about it because right now, but I do recognize there are some policy decisions that will have to be taken. But I don't make policy without data and evidence. When those come at hand, we make some decisions.
If the items being handled contain more than 1% THC, then it will fall under the regulations. If they are derived from hemp, which are so defined as less than 1% tetrahydrocannabinol, then it's a different category. So if your students are going to be handling it. But you know, this is something we need to have a discussion about, and I'm pretty sure that the regulations will allow for that, because we would love to have, I think Diane was speaking a lot about it, because this is really, I hate to use the term low-hanging fruit. I don't know what that means, but it's something we can access relatively easily, which we've been doing for many years. Just want to take the opportunity to recognize another board member who's standing at the mic, Prophet Greg.
Okay, all right. Go. Okay. Well, I thought we had exhausted this question, but
I just want to say that you're better off here than in England, because there it's 0.2%. And anything above that is considered illegal.
Yeah, all right.
Well, you can see the wisdom of the legislation.
Yeah. Okay, I think we are ready now. Okay.
Sure.
Well,
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nestor Garrett. But thank you guys for your panels and discussions about the cannabis industry. I have, I guess, a couple questions and concerns, I guess, about this. I've actually been living half between California and Jamaica. I've actually been a medical marijuana patient there for the last 10 years and a legal grower personally for the last 3 years. My license right here with me. One of the things I noticed from the conversation that we had, right, talking about exporting as being one of the number one things. I'm very aware of Canada being one of the main countries interested. We've all worked with Jamaica and Jamaican strains of exporting over to Canada, especially being the fact that they can't produce as much of their strain, the GC, enough over there. They don't really want to deal with the states regarding to getting their strains and refer ours. My concern I have, especially even coming to the Cannabis Cup here, is that we have mentioned a lot about quality and quality. And as a user, someone who's been involved in this for years, that's the problem that we have in Jamaica, is quality. We have stepped within the last, I'd say, decade and dropped our quality standards of where that the States and Canada, and even within Tel Aviv, Israel, has stepped up. And it's a lot better than what we have, which is very sad, being that we are the industry known for it, which is also the plus side that we can redeem ourselves, that we are the brand of herb, of marijuana, of cannabis. How are we going to go about improving the quality that we have here regarding that? You know, is there going to be, for example, are we going to start, yes, working with the farmers that we have here, or are we also going to start inviting over farmers from the States to come down and maybe share some of their processes that can help with our local farmers? Because one of the things I've heard a lot is that Colorado has been one of the big states that you've gone for like information, research, and things like that. Sad to say, Colorado is the worst quality of strain compared to Seattle, California, and to Oregon.
Yep, okay. Well, all right, remember, we are trying to finish, so, continue, but please, finish the question so that we can go on.
Sorry, don't drag it on. I guess the purpose I'm trying to say that I think that we have a very great opportunity to jump into this industry and really kick it down a lot. But one of the main things going to happen is that we need to make sure that our quality from our farmers, from local farmers, from everywhere else, that is up to par, that once we are given this opportunity, to export to these places, that they keep doing business with us because of our quality. That was one thing I had, and then the second one I'll be very quick about. I didn't quite understand. You mentioned about something about different taxes regarding growing from an indoor to an outdoor, which that part I didn't quite understand why there would be, being that indoor and outdoor has two different major pluses. You know, an indoor, yes, can grow a lot quicker. You know, you can maybe do within a year 3 different grows, but then at the same end of time, it might even look prettier than the outdoor, but it doesn't have the same kind of potency within it. It doesn't last as long. It's something that, yes, it's strong, it smells amazing immediately, but it doesn't last as long as an outdoor thing. So even though the outdoor might take longer, an outdoor A can grow more yield than what an indoor can do. One plant from outdoor can do 4 or 5 more than what an indoor plant can do. So, and done right, an indoor outdoor can be better than an indoor. So I just wanted to understand why there was a difference within the taxation.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks. And
now you have stated that Colorado is the worst and that California is the best. First of all, you will not see in any state a best state, worst state. We have looked at what you call standard operating procedures, and we have identified among the different standards that are published the standard operating procedure of a particular operation in Colorado, which is the best practice. There are over 200 standard operating procedures in that entity when compared with the standard operating procedures of other chiefs to charge. Yeah. And so, it's not a question as to whether we smoke it and we feel that it's better. We're looking at the value chain or the details of the value chain. What are these standard operating procedures? Under what conditions, etc. Down to the whole process of the wastewater control and analysis based on the kind of laboratories that they have, which do the testing and the quantitative accuracy of these laboratories. So we didn't just go to Colorado and take somebody's word for anything. And it is on that basis that we say, this is best practice. Let us therefore try to see to what extent we can in fact incorporate some of these best practice standards, knowing that our conditions or circumstances are different. So we do what we do as standards organizations internationally, what we call a methodology of adopting and adapting. So we are adopting, but when we do the test, the pilot, which is going to take 13 to 15 weeks, we'll begin to verify and validate and adjust. Because the water that you use in your hydroponics is what we call soft water. Our water is hard water, with calcium carbonate. It's a completely different ecosystem that we have to operate. It's a different microclimate. It's a different pest control system. Everything is different. And so, it is not merely a subjective thing of when you smoke. There are scientific principles that deal with we deal with quantity, we deal with quality, and that deal with methodology of validating things.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Professor Davidson. All right.
Greetings, my question is like a twofold. First, what I want to kind of get clarity in is that when we are analyzing and investigating the medicinal market, have we come forward to a defining factor, or is it still being worked out to say that there will be also high THC plants that can be utilized within the framework of defining it as medicinal? I just want that to be cleared first.
All right, I guess Dr. Gordon, you want to?
We don't at this point anticipate placing limits on creativity and innovation. So whatever people have that can work, once it meets the other requirements of the regulations.
You have asked a very, very important question. Because some people feel that that when you say medical marijuana, what you're talking about is CBD, high CBD, and very low THC. Now, that particular